Welcome to RSAC Conference 2025. We're here recording from the Cyber Risk TV studio at the Marriott Marquis in San Francisco. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me for this interview is James Hadley, founder and chief innovation officer at Immersive. Congratulations on your new position. Just heard you've promoted a CEO and demoted yourself to something more enjoyable, I would think.
Yeah, no, it's great. I get to spend more time on the things I love, which is product innovation, cyber expertise within the business, and then also spending time with our customers.
Yeah. I've had a lot of friends who have been in that position, and we're relieved to step out of that role and focus on the stuff they enjoy more. But you've got to do it to a certain point, right?
Yeah,
you got to get it there. Congratulations on Immersive for being nominated as a Best IT Security Related Training Program finalist in the 2025 SC Awards. And I want to learn more about your company, about the market you serve. I think early on, I've been in information security for a long time, and only been to training a few times. Training was always hard. Training budget was hard to come by, and we never trained as a team. It was always a very individual thing. Like, okay, this year you get to go to training. Next year Kevin gets to go to training. And it was something we did for our careers. We didn't really think about, we did think about training benefiting what we did in our day-to-day job, but we didn't think of it as leveling up the organization, which I get very excited. I spend a lot of time advising organizations on security operations and talking to startups into space. And in my spare time, a lot of the research I do is analyzing how breaches occur. And it's almost always people and process. Yeah. It's like they had the technology they needed, they had the people they needed, but the processes sucked, and the people didn't always know what they were doing.
Yeah.
So tell me a bit about what you've built here, because I think it addresses a lot of these issues.
No, thank you for having me. So when I started Immersive, it was about 8 years ago, we looked at the sort of the people side of cybersecurity. And a lot of large enterprise organizations spending billions of dollars on technology and software and more boxes and flashing lights, but they don't actually have enough people to sort of feed and water those things, let alone actually exploit the security capability of those products. So what we wanted to do is, rather than train people, which is kind of, it doesn't actually measure or prove knowledge or skills or judgment, we wanted a way of actually upskilling people, but also measuring and proving risk and risk coverage. So one of the things we do is help large enterprise organizations measure and prove knowledge, skills, and judgment relevant to everyone in the organization, but we adapt the modality based on the audience. So what's fit for a developer isn't right for a blue team analyst, isn't right for a red teamer. So we immerse, hence the name of the business,
right.
individuals into exercises and simulations and cyber ranges where we signpost the outcome they need to achieve. And by upskilling themselves through problem solving and troubleshooting, not only have they completed that objective, but we now have a data point that we can prove that person knows that thing. Mm-hmm. And if we map those across 3,000 exercises, we can then show an enterprise about where their gaps are, be them a developer, cloud engineer, offensive, defensive, executive during a tabletop crisis, or a cyber crisis, all the way down to the end user workforce as well. So we cover everyone in the enterprise.
Yeah, and it's it's something that's incredibly important. You can often tell organizations that haven't had this training by how the breach is sometimes handled in the public eye, and it's painful to watch. It's clear they didn't talk about whether or not they would pay the ransom. They didn't discuss the need for transparency when you discuss a breach. And, sometimes it just takes a long time for the company to come out with a public statement. And you very much get the feeling that they weren't ready, that they didn't have these steps outlined. And then when oftentimes years later, you get more details about the breach. And that's what I like to jump into, where you find, okay, like they had the general idea of what they should do, but clearly they didn't know how to use the tool, and they missed the attack. And it's painful to watch, because oftentimes like 30 minutes, an hour, like a bit of training goes a long way.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing, especially now, is much more compliance with regulatory demands to demonstrate that organizations have gone through an exercise, a crisis management exercise. And those traditionally have been delivered through PowerPoint, slides and a tabletop, where it's very linear. and the conversation goes out and back in, but there's no ramifications based on the conversation. They're hard to schedule, and once you've done one or two, they can be a bit dry. So we developed our cyber crisis simulation product so that companies and boards can run dynamic exercises, and everyone in the room has to vote for what they would do, and we can see the votes under time pressure with social media injects, and based on the decision they make as a group, the crisis dynamically changes. So, for example, with ransomware, as we're seeing now in the UK with Marks and Spencer being taken offline, it's okay. So what are we going to do? And if you do that, then like I said, the decision path changes. And then if they have to do a statement to the press, they actually have to upload that in our platform. What would you actually type to the press, and how would you handle this with investors?
Oh, that's great.
And then we record all of that evidence, and we score how well they did, and we record things like confidence and rationale. So then we can give reports back to our enterprise customers to say, actually, you had divergence of thought, and some people were making terrible decisions with high levels of confidence, and that is a really bad combination. And by going through these scenarios and crisis simulations and drills, they can build that muscle memory where they're like, actually, we've done this before, we know what we're doing, let's be very calm. And I think what you spoke to earlier is true, which is organisations that haven't gone through this exercise, it can be panic and a lot of headless chickens, and communication flows become very disparate and chaotic.
It would be very interesting to put like a Fitbit, some kind of health monitor.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay, your heart rate was lower this time. You're doing better.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What we want organisations to have confidence in their scenarios based on multiple cyber threats. So it could be data exfiltration, it could be physical cyber attack. So by going through them, they've got this muscle memory of, no, we've practiced, we've rehearsed this 100 times, we're ready to go.
Yeah, and just the word security. Somebody pointed out once that the Latin, where the word comes from, the etymology of the word means without worry. And I think there's a side of security where you're preparing by getting the tools, implementing them, putting them into place, and then sleeping well at night. None of that goes to that. The sleeping well at night all comes from your skills and the amount of practice that you do. And I've often likened it to a sports team that's never practiced together, and that's the average security team. How could you possibly expect to play well, to perform well, when you actually need to perform?
We used to have a sort of a inside sort of sense of humor around when a crisis happens. You don't turn to the person that runs to their desk drawer and pulls out their CISSP certificate and says, I've got this. You turn to the person that's got the most experience in the room, because they're the calmest in the room and they know how to deal with it. And it's only through going through these scenarios and exercises that builds that confidence. Yeah,
for sure. So we're starting to see other stuff in the market like this. I love that we're seeing these kind of live fire exercises, these simulations, that let you build some of that muscle memory that you need to have that confidence when things actually go down and emotions go up. How do you see yourself in the market? What are some of the differentiators there? Because it looks like you have a lot of different things going on here.
Yeah, so I think the first thing I'll talk to you about enterprise. So our focus very much is on large enterprise organizations that typically might have 10,000 developers. They've got large cyber teams. They're running different crisis management scenarios. They might have 50,000, 100,000 employees, and they want a single platform that can give them that security you talked about without worry, that everyone knows their role as it relates to security, and they can prove it, and that their skills are up to date. So I think that the thing that makes us quite unique is that enterprise, like looking after the large financial services, government, defence, healthcare and tech. I think the second thing I want to talk about is breadth, depth and speed. So cybersecurity is a massive topic, right? And there's so many specialities like around different roles and what have you. But Immersive covers everything from how do you spell cyber, what do you need to do as an end user, through to secure coding for developers, cloud engineering, DevSecOps, blue team, red team, all the way up to the crisis management team for the board. So we can do storeroom to boardroom across everything. And the final thing as part of that was speed. So we have our own internal threat research team called Container 7. They're constantly working on research around 0 days, identifying vulnerabilities, but they also form part of our rapid response team. So when a new vulnerability comes out or a CVE, we turn that into a hands-on exercise within 24 hours. So I think the record we had was WannaCry within 4 hours in the platform. And that means rather than reading about threats, which is quite dry, they can just get actually hands-on, both from a defensive and offensive perspective.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's faster than most people are probably patching those things, right?
Yeah, I remember Log4j. Within 24 hours, we had defensive cyber lab for the SOC team, threat hunting lab. We had an offensive lab for the
Yeah.
how to exploit it, and we built a crisis management exercise for
Mm.
how do you make decisions around offline patching, taking off business services for business executives.
Yeah, it's amazing. That's something I often talk about us learning the lessons we need to learn from. So it's part of the reason I look into breaches, try and understand how companies fail, and Log4j is a great example. Our first lesson actually came from Equifax with the Struts 2 breach. And the lesson that came out of that, they did a lot of things right. They dropped everything, told 249 people, um, there's a Struts 2 vulnerability. You need to search your system, see if we've got it, and if so, update it within 48 hours. Everyone searched, looked for it, didn't find it, and that 48 hours came and went, and weeks later, the attacker found it from the outside.
Oh, yeah.
On dozens and
Exposed.
dozens of systems. They had like over 30 web shells installed on different systems. And the big lessons learned from that is you need to be able to find a small Java library in a huge corporate environment.
Yeah.
And this is a company that had something like 90,000 publicly routable IP address space that they owned. And Log4j, same lesson. Almost 5 years later, from 2017 to 2021. Again, even some security vendors we saw took over a month to tell their customers which of their products had Log4j in it, which was telling. Some customers told them same day, some customers took over a month. So it was, again, very clear in the public space who was prepared, who wasn't. And fast forward to today, and I still talk to a lot of organizations. I advise a lot of companies, haven't learned this lesson. They still don't know how to find a small Java library in a large corporate environment.
Yeah.
So the fact that you're doing that, I think that's hugely useful.
Yeah, I think a lot of organisations traditionally have focused on technology because you can buy a box and you've got to look after it. People are really hard to manage by comparison. So trying to create a culture of security champions and then also identifying hidden cyber talent in the business to help remediate and find these threats and be curious and passionate and want to solve problems. I think all of that helps drive down organisational risk.
Yeah, I've never studied a case where another product would have solved the problem. They always had everything they needed in terms of people and technology. They just weren't using it to its fullest potential.
Yeah.
So the threat research is amazing. That's not something I've seen here before. I don't know how unique that is in the space, but I've not heard anybody else talk about that.
Yeah, so I think when I look at this category, I think there are a lot of companies that like training companies that go, oh, we should do cyber because it's really important. They've sort of gone into that space.
It's a training company doing cyber.
Whereas we're a cybersecurity business delivering exercises and simulations and ranges. So within our organisation, Max Vetter is our VP of Cyber. He came out of the Met Police and the agencies alongside myself. And we have amazing researchers in the team that each focus on their different specialities. That includes OT, offensive, defensive, application security, cloud security. And it's that sort of those key experts that are working with our customers and responding to the threats to make sure that we can prove their customers have the skills that they need to keep them safe. And as part of that work, they're doing the zero-day research. As I shared earlier, I think last week CISA, or was this week CISA, did an advisory based on 5 CVs that we identified in OT equipment as part of upcoming module that we're looking forward to release.
Yeah, I'm behind on my CISA Kev emails. I get those emails every time they come in, but it's been a busy show. And speaking about a busy show, what's the latest with the product? What are you talking about that's new here at RSA?
So there's 2 new things we're talking about. One of which is when a security incident happens, or even the developers, it's never really an individual that's just down to fix it. It's a team sport. So we've actually built a new cyber exercise program which allows groups of developers to work together in a high intensity scenario where they have to fix and remediate live code and go through the full CI/CD pipeline remediation and QA of a vulnerable application. And they can see the vulnerabilities coming in through a forged, injected bug bounty program, and they have to fix it in real time. So that's something that we're quite excited about. And the second one is this quarter we're due to release our operational technology module. So many large organizations that have manufacturing, oil and gas, they have OT equipment. It's very hard to upskill and prove that those individuals can remediate OT threats. So we're actually launching our own OT module, which upskills defenders and attackers, so for penetration testers, on OT. where when they're doing that, they can actually see the OT in real time through the platform that they're compromising and see
Yeah.
the real world impacts of that.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty cool.
That is very cool. It's I've seen a few video examples of that. You know, little pump jacks. You know, that smoke when you rev them up too high. You know, get a little bit of you get to live a little bit of Stuxnet, right? Something like that. That
Yeah.
kind of scenario, which is I mean, it seems cute, you know, but I think it's really impactful when you're actually putting hands on something, you know, and you can see the impact of it. I think that's very important for learning.
Yeah, and it makes it real and it makes it sticky. I think what we're seeing a lot of demand for at the moment is how do I actually raise the cybersecurity capabilities of my IT team?
Yeah.
Because they might be seeing
They're the
things.
ones doing security.
They're the ones doing it. So cyber isn't their job, but everyone. I think cybersecurity used to be the responsibility of the geeks in the basement, and now it's everyone has their own part of their job, which is cyber relevant to their role.
Yeah.
So actually, how do we upskill that broader IT base in just what is the basics around where the threats, how you can identify threats, what looks like malicious behavior or suspicious behavior, so they know when to then raise something up to the security team.
And then finally, before what I want to wrap on is something I've been talking about a lot is cyber resilience, which I think is sometimes poorly defined. You know, but very simple. Basically, keeping the business running for as long, you know, as little downtime, running as usual. But also, you know, somewhat agility. You know, being able to, you know, you shouldn't be learning how to use your tools. You know, at the moment an incident is happening, and you've got to recover things, and it does require some thought ahead of time. And okay, what would we do in this scenario? You know, how would we? You know, like I think of Delta CEO talking about how they had 40,000 Windows servers they had to recover BitLocker keys from, right? And I think, wow, like if you did that scenario on a tabletop, you'd think we need less Windows servers. Like maybe some of those should be containers, or you know, we need a better process to recover these things. And that was a bit of a black swan event, but still, I think a lot of that resilience comes down to this kind of training.
Yeah, I think organizations, often large enterprises, we talked about it, they often have all of the policies, the compliance, the certifications,
Yeah.
the documentation. But the number of times they've actually gone through and gone, well, let's just
Yeah.
do a live fire of that.
Yeah.
Let's pull the cord now. What do we actually do?
All
So,
that's going to look different after that, right?
yeah, and it's only through doing that they go, hang on, well, actually, that needed to be rebuilt before that did, and now that database is out of sync with that one, so now the application won't
Yeah.
launch. And it's only going through that scenario that you
Yeah.
actually discover these things. So I think exercises and simulations enable organizations to prove their resilience, to prove that they can recover, so that they can demonstrate it to regulators, cyber insurers and customers, suppliers, but also have that, what we said about sleeping safely, that hang on, we know we've done this, we're good to go.
Yeah, I remember long ago when I was writing a DR plan, we tabletopped recovering our main customer relationship database, and I remember just doing the math on how long it would take. You know, backups on magnetic tapes, right? Just pushing tapes, just having somebody sit in front and just push tapes, wait, swap tape, wait,
Yeah.
and it was 14 days. It was 14 days of just pushing tapes in and out, and we were like, that's not even close to our
What we need.
recovery time objective. Yeah.
Yeah, I think some really interesting things coming out of the regulators about the cyber lifeboat, which is what's the minimum viable business that you
Yeah.
have to operate. You don't always need to restore everything. What is the
How long
lifeboat
to
that
reboot
keeps
the
your
whole thing?
business? Yeah, so the lifeboat is this concept of a cyber lifeboat is the minimum viable business and applications and data, and you have it separate from your main ship. So that in the event that the
Oh,
cyber
interesting.
attack happens, you've
Okay.
got the cyber lifeboat to go into, and you know it's always working. But it's a much smaller, cut down version of the business, just to keep the lights going whilst you go and fix the main issue. back
And you
on
got
the
to
ship.
work with the business to figure out what that looks like, right? You
Yeah.
got to have a business impact analysis. You know, cyber has to work with the other parts of the business to understand what that even looks like.
Yeah, it's not an easy technology fix because you need to understand what is the core business. I remember Dan Potter, who heads up our cyber resilience division within Immersive. His background was at a bank, a large enterprise bank,
Right.
and he talked about, well, no, we identified as part of the exercise that to do a password reset meant I can't say the number of employees it'll tell the bank, but 100,000 people all have to then call the help desk to get a password reset. The call system can only handle 12 concurrent calls in the
Yeah.
log. That's not going to work. and you can't lock traders out of a banking system during the working day because you're trying to force a password reset. So you only really identify those things when you go through these plans.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's like so many DR plans would use old hardware. We've already got this old hardware. We know it works. We'll just use that. Okay. What happens if BCP, if the DR plan is successful? Now your full workforce has to work on that decade-old hardware, right? You don't have enough. It's going to fall over immediately, and now you have the same problem all over again. Yeah. So, yeah. You learn by doing,
Yeah,
right?
100%. Immersing yourself in exercises.
Exactly. Lovely. James, thank you so much for the conversation. I think we went a little bit longer because it was just that interesting.
Well,
So,
thank you for having me.
yeah. And congrats again to Immersive for being nominated as a Best IT Security Related Training Program finalist in the 2025 SC Awards.